When we're live. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Censored to Celebrate It. I'm your host, Melita Noël Cantú, and I'm so happy to be with you all today. It is quite rainy here in Austin, Texas, so I just wanted to let you know that my connection seems a little bit choppy today, even though I am hardwired and everything should be good to go. But if there are any technical difficulties, just stay with us, and we will be back as soon as we can, and we'll just hope that everything is great as it has been in the past. So welcome to all of you, and I'm looking forward to talking about sexuality education, particularly for parents and professionals, with Remi Newman. And here she is. Welcome, Remi, in California. And Remi is, oh, I just dropped my notes, so I'm going to pick them up here. Okay. We're going to be exploring the alphabet soup of sexuality and gender today, and particularly around sexuality education for people of all ages. So that's why we've really invited parents to come in today, as well as professionals who work in this field. And if you can hear me, please go ahead and press yes in the comments, just so I can be sure that everything is good to go with you. And then I will go ahead and let you know a little bit more about my guest, Remi, who I met at the Catalyst Con conference a little bit more than a year ago. And Remi was talking about gender creative youth, and that was the first time that, even though I've been in this field for a really long time, it was the first time I'd heard that term, and I just was really captured by it, and it was a real aha moment for me to hear her talking about it. And she's done a lot of research in this area and some writing in this area. And she also has, I'm going to put it on you now, Remi, so we can see you. She has her, she's bilingual, and bilingual sexuality educator, and she tells me that she became bilingual in her adulthood in Spanish, which is pretty amazing to me because I've been trying that for a long time. She spent over 10 years empowering people from a variety of backgrounds to feel more comfortable as sexual beings. And she has her master's in arts in sexuality education from New York University. And for those of you who don't know, there are not a whole lot of these programs where you can get your master's and PhD. And so I'm always wanting to highlight where you can get them. And NYU is one of them.
Well, except I should let people know that it's actually a sad thing is that program no longer exists.
Oh my gosh, I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, okay. The NYU program. So unfortunately, it's not a place you can go get your master's now. But wow. Since then, San Francisco State has one. So
yep. And that's
and the Widener University. So East Coast and West Coast. I know of at least those two.
Oh, good to know. Well, thank you, Remi. I had not heard that, and so I got my master's at San Francisco State, and I know folks who are getting their PhDs and masters at Widener, so that is good to know. And you also went to Penn State, speaking of Pennsylvania, and Widener to get your women's studies degree. I know you've also presented, and you're a member of QuadS, which is the Society for the Scientific Study of Sexuality, and also ASECT, which is the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. And you do a lot of presenting around infant and child sexuality at those conferences. So I'm excited to hear a little bit more about that. And I know as a new mom, you decided to create a program called Having the Talk Before They Can Talk. And I've been featuring that a lot in what I've been doing to let people know about this HOA today. So I know we're all excited to hear more about that. And you've worked with social workers, therapists, educators, medical professionals, as well as in the HIV and AIDS communities as an educator to work with at-risk communities around the diversity of sexuality and gender. And I am just super excited to be talking with you today more. I've seen you present a couple times at conferences, and I'm excited that we get to talk one-on-one today. So welcome, Remi.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you, Melita, for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you. And I have some questions, and the way we start off every Censored to Celebrated is that I just want to do a reminder that my goal is to fully witness and celebrate my guest as we explore sexuality and gender in our conversation. And as some of you may know, it's not always the easiest topic to talk about. There's a lot of taboo around it. There's a lot of censorship. And that's why, for me, it's really important as a sexuality educator, and I meet so many different amazing professionals in this field, that I like having people on who do feel comfortable talking about it, but it doesn't mean there's not still vulnerability. So I just want to be aware of that, and I invite you to join me in celebrating what Remi has to offer, and just holding space as we explore this topic together. So with that being said, our first question is, as you know, one of the things that sexuality and gender professionals talk about a lot is the alphabet soup. Why do we need it? Is it important? Which one do we use? How many letters does it have? So in your work, what do you use? What acronym
Yeah, it's
do
a
you
good
use?
question. So if people are, just to clarify, alphabet soup is the LGBT, sometimes QQI
Yes.
acronym that is used to talk about the gay community and or the transgender community, the intersex community as well. And I was thinking about it when I was in undergrad in college, and I was first a part of the gay community as an activist. We used to say, at the time, we said queer. We used the word queer a lot. You know, we reclaimed that word, and for us that felt very inclusive. Didn't say exactly what someone was, but if you were queer, you were part of the community. And we also used the term family, and that was the way we would say, you know, is she family? Oh, I think he's family, or which was also it felt very inclusive, but obviously it also just has a really nice connotation of we're a family. So I just kind of wanted to mention that. But when I'm out doing education, I'm not going to necessarily use those terms. And when I certainly became aware, I remember when the groups, I think in college when there wasn't a T, before we even had a T, and I think in some ways, I mean, you're talking about two very different things when you're talking about sexual orientation and gender identity, and they get lumped together a lot. And yes, there's certainly crossover when it comes to that community, those communities. But I feel like when I'm doing education, it really, even just use LGBT, I feel like it's important sometimes to start off with, let's explain what those are. So, and explain the difference between talking about sexual orientation and gender identity. I found that when I started doing some work I work at Kaiser, and I've been able, at Kaiser Permanente, so I do some sex education there with doctors and providers, and early on when I started doing that, I and the other people I was doing the education with kind of decided that we were just going to stick with LGBT, that because we knew we had a very limited amount of time for this audience, and people were going to have to get up and get back to their desks, and they have limited amount of time, during a presentation at the lunch hour, and are only going to grasp, a few things maybe, So I think that just using the LGBT, because it's something that most people are familiar with, although I do recall being in a presentation and having I was listening to a presentation, and one doctor whispered to another one, "What's LGBT?" And that was kind of a moment for me, and I thought, okay, there you go. I shouldn't assume that even everybody knows what that is. So I think for me, even though I'm certainly aware of, queer questioning, intersex, and the importance of looking at, all that, I think it's really tricky. I think it kind of comes down to that it's just impossible to explain the complexity and diversity of human sexuality with a few letters. So I think no matter what we do, in a sense, we fall short. But of course, we need we need it in a sense because we need language to be able to talk about things. And if we don't have a half an hour to explain, every single community that we're talking about, it's something that it's a tool that can be useful, but I think it's also a tool that can be really limiting. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I guess the thing is it would really depend on the audience and what I had time for and how much time I wanted to spend picking apart each of those letters.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense, and I think it makes sense because in so many different situations we do need to use different language to connect with our audience, and so, so it sounds like kind of generally you use the LGBT just because it's the most commonly accepted, but you're aware of other times that something else might work better.
Right, exactly.
The audience. That's great. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I recently too got that question of, I'm not exactly sure what LGBT stands for. I think I know the L and the G, but I'm not sure, and so I think we don't want to take that for granted that people are aware of that. As sexuality educators, that's part of our job, for sure. So I would like to, since I'm also a sexuality educator, I found a picture from when I first realized I was a sexuality educator and that it was a thing you could be, and I thought I'd share it because I had very short hair at the time. I don't know if you can see this, but it was a
Oh,
long
yeah.
time. It was a long time ago, and you could see this was very much like a learning and instruction program kind of picture and activity that we did. Anyway, but it was a long time ago, and I'm wondering if tell us briefly about your journey to becoming a sexuality educator. How did you know you were one? How did you start working in this field? And any advice you might have for people who are getting started in the field.
Okay, yeah, good question. So as you said, I was a women's studies major in undergrad, and that just happened. I didn't go in planning that. I took an intro to women's studies in college. I had no idea what I wanted to study, and that class just spoke to me in so many different ways. And I started taking more and more classes, and what really resonated with me the most was all the issues around sexuality. So after college, I discovered that it's not that easy to find a job with a women's studies degree, but I did lots of different things. I won't go into all that. But along that journey, I met a man, fell in love, and ended up moving to Mexico, and that for a little while, and that's how I learned Spanish also. And that man who later became my husband. And what happened was when I was there, I started teaching English just as a job, something to do, and to make a little bit of money. And I discovered that I really liked teaching, but that my passion, I knew my passion was not the English language. And the more that I thought about sort of, the work I had been doing and what I really wanted to do, and there was actually a moment when it really hit me, and I do remember this quite clearly. I was teaching adults and kids and youth, and it was once when I was doing a class with a few young people, and they were so curious, and they had lots of questions for me about, living in the U.S. and being an American, and all kinds of questions about pop culture and things. And so we used to talk and chat, and I don't know how it came up, but somehow the issue of being gay came up. And one of the kids made some kind of a comment, I don't remember exactly what it was, but just basically saying, well, that's wrong, kind of thing. And I kind of took a deep breath, and I thought, well, okay, here we are. I'm sitting here. These parents, have sent their children to me to teach them English. They have not sent them here for me to teach them my personal values or teach them anything about sexuality or sexual orientation. But I felt as though it just in my heart, I felt as though I needed to say something, and I remember saying something like que vivimos en un mundo muy grande, that we live in a very big world, and in this world there are all kinds of people, and that's part of the beauty and is the diversity of our world, and I hope that someday you can see that. Not, quote word for word, but that's basically the gist of it. I just wanted to keep the conversation very positive, and I did not want to get in trouble with this child's parents and get the school in trouble or anything. So
a little bit of self-censorship there, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a pivotal moment for me, because I felt like, oh my goodness, what an amazing thing it would be for me to be able to actually not feel censored and be able to teach these kids, or teach any kids for that matter, about sexuality. And I thought, this is what I need to do. So I started looking into programs, and that's when I found the NYU Master's Program and applied, got in, and moved back to the States to go to graduate school. And so there it was an amazing program. The late Robert Frank Kerr was one of my professors, Ronald Moglia, Norm Scherzer. They are just incredible professors, and I just owe a huge debt to them. And from there, my first job was in HIV, I guess. So yeah, I should say, if you're thinking about going into this field, be aware there are not very many jobs for sex educators. So it's a matter of being really creative and seeing where you might fit in, and who it is you want to work with, and what it is that you can actually do, because chances are you're not going to go online and see, oh, we're hiring a sex educator. I don't think I've ever seen that.
And so much of it depends on the political climate, too, it seems, in terms of funding and how accessible this sort of education is. Yeah,
absolutely. And so what I've done and been able to do is, through all my jobs, I've worked in HIV, and now working at a medical center, and then also on my own, doing my own private practice, but is really also just looking at what's the opportunity here.
Yes.
So even like with the HIV work, I was able to really expand beyond my job. I was doing HIV prevention in the community. This was at a community health center called Settlement Health in East Harlem, New York City. And so we did HIV prevention in the community, places where people were at high risk, so incarceration facilities, detox facilities, but also just community centers and working with people who are positive, or as well, prevention with positives and day programs. But from there, I was sent to a couple trainings to learn, must have been HIV trainings, I don't remember specifically, and I remember thinking, I could do this, I could do these kind of trainings. So I came up, and I also was noticing at the time that I was doing work, we would go out with peers. They were called HIV peer educators. So someone who was positive. Basically, they would send an educator like me to go out with somebody who was HIV positive to go to these different sites. And I can't remember exactly how it came up, but somehow, talking about HIV prevention and safer sex and condoms, at one of these sites, the issue of anal sex came up. And I remember that the peer who I was working with made some comment very quickly about how things are supposed to go, now I'm gonna say wrong, things are supposed to come out of there, not go in there. And I thought, oh goodness, well, here we have another moment where we're presenting a united front here. Here we are representing the community health center, and I'm here with my co-educator, and I thought, oh goodness, maybe there's room for a little education here, and we can talk about anal sex, because if we're going to go out and talk about HIV prevention, maybe we need to be able to talk about anal sex in a way that's realistic, and not saying that it's something, without judgment.
Yeah. Let me just interrupt for a minute,
sure.
Remi. Just to let folks know, if you're just joining us, my name is Melita Noël Cantú, and I'm thrilled to be talking with Remi Newman today, who's a sexuality educator in California. It's our third episode of From Censored to Celebrated, and we're talking specifically about how, if you have children in your life, you can talk with them about sex and gender. And I just wanted to show a picture of me as a sexuality educator. I realized I wasn't on camera last time I showed this picture, so I've been doing this for a while, and I know Remi has too, and I'm so thrilled to be able to be here with her and talking with her about her experience. We do have a question from the audience, Remi, and I'm going to read it to you just so you can hear it. And I think I need a little more clarification. Sheila, if you want to join in on that or give us a bit more clarification, we can get to your question in a little bit. But Remi, just so you know, and I put it in the comments so you can see it, the question is, what is your experience or knowledge about an alteration in sexuality or gender bias after significant head injury or insult? So I don't know if you have experience in that area.
Yeah, I'd have to say that's probably out of my scope.
Okay. But Sheila, please do, if there's any more information you want to ask.
Well, I guess I wouldn't say it's totally. I mean, I've done some workshops and some, around sexuality and disability, so I guess I'm assuming we're talking about, so yeah, I guess I would want to know more specifically. Are you talking about loss of libido? Are you talking about, mechanics, or trying to find the right position? If there's, I guess it would need a little more information.
Yeah, great. And how can people contact you if they wanted to ask a question more directly? Because not everybody wants to ask in the open forum.
Right. Yeah, emailing me just at healthysexforlife@gmail.com.
Okay.
So you can look at my website, healthysexforlife.com, and then go ahead and send me an email there at the Gmail account.
Fantastic. Okay, let's go on to our next question. I know you are working on some projects, and we only have about 10 more minutes. So if you would briefly, I know it goes so fast. Yeah. So if you would briefly tell us about a project you're working on and something you're really excited about around your work in diverse sexuality and gender.
Okay, well, I guess since we did say we're going to talk about infant-child sexuality, I should probably jump to that.
Sounds good.
Yeah, as Melita said, I got interested in that topic, being a new mom, and also discovered early on that there were lots of other new moms and dads as well, and parents who had a lot of questions and really wanted answers, wanted to feel comfortable being the primary sex educators for their kids, but we're just not sure when, how to start, worried that they're going to say too much. So I started doing a lot of research on that, and that's when I created the workshop, Having the Talk Before They Can Talk, specifically around infant and child sexuality, so working with parents or primary caregivers of very young children. And so I guess, I don't know what else to say about that right now, but I mean, it's something that because there's so much I could say about it, but that it's a topic that it's very taboo. I mean, mostly when people think about kids and sex, they just think about, you know, sexual abuse or, you know, something like that, and not think about it, you know, in terms of just, you know, that we are sexual beings from birth until death. You know, that's something that's with us. So I think that I like to focus in, you know, working with parents and answering parents' questions on, you know, just the real positive, and that, you know, this is a part of your child's life, and whether you say something or not, you're giving them an education, because every time you don't say something, that's sending them a powerful message. And even, I mean, when you're talking about infants, it's not so much, you're not answering their questions, but it's in how you care for them and bathe them and caress them and you know, show them they're learning love and trust, and they're learning, you know, the most basic things about human relationships from you. You're their first teacher, and you're their first intimate relationship. And I think sometimes we don't think of it like that. We want to think of sexuality, or I shouldn't say we want to, but some parents maybe want to think of it as something that's going to start at puberty, or it's going to start when they're 16, but it's not something that the switch just gets turned on. It's already there. It's already happening. And I think something, though, it is important to let parents know that to even start talking about it. So even when you have a little baby and you're changing their diaper, I mean, we talk to our kids about, our babies, about lots of things, even though they don't know what we're saying, right? We say, oh, you're so adorable, and I love you, and you're perfect, and, you know, but we don't necessarily say, and look at your penis, what a perfect penis you have, you know, look how it works, and or look at your vulva, you have a clitoris, oh my goodness, it's so cute, you know. But I think why it's important, and I encourage parents to do that, even with infants, is because if you can't say those words to your child when they have no idea what you're saying because they're 2 months old, it's not going to get easier to say them when they're 12.
Wow. So one of the tips you're recommending is really saying it as you're talking to your infant, is using those words and getting yourself comfortable as a parent or caregiver with these words, so that as they get older and understand what you're saying, they feel comfortable as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a part of conversation. I mean, I noticed even for me as a parent, you know, having a boy, penis was pretty natural. Scrotum, I wasn't quite as used to saying, you know, just talking about scrotum in everyday conversation, but we just started, you know, like, and then with diaper cream, I started calling it anus cream, because I thought, well, we put it on the anus, so we, you know, saying, okay, it's time to put a little, you know, anus cream on. And that really stuck. And as he was a little bit older and, you know, was starting to talk, you know, he would use the term anus cream, you know, or, you know, anus. So it was just, you know, a matter of doing it and making myself comfortable with it, you know, as well. So then, and then it just, because as they get older and the stakes get higher, you know, that's when you want them to feel like they can come to you, you know, when they're old enough to actually come to you with a question, a concern, a worry. The best thing is if that's been a conversation throughout their childhood, throughout your relationship with them, it's just going to happen so much more naturally. They're not going to be scared. You know, I mean, who knows? They may be a little bit, but it's not going to be a completely awkward, impossible conversation. Not to say, though, I don't want to say if a parent hasn't started, you know, and they have a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old, it's not too late. It's certainly worth it. And you could start the conversation with, you know, this isn't something that we've normally talked about, and it's not easy for me, or I'm not used to it, or my parents didn't talk to me about it, but I'm learning about it more now, and I really want you to know that you can come to me. So as a child is older, you can always start. And they may look at you and roll their eyes, you know, if they're already a teenager or a preteen at that point. But I think continuing to let them know that you are there, even if they say, oh, you know, I don't want to talk about that with you. Say, okay, that's fine. Maybe today you don't, but I just want to let you know that I'm here for you if and when you do want to talk about it.
That's great. I think that's so important, and that's one of the questions I get a lot as a sexuality educator, and I'm imagining you do too, is what do I do if I didn't start, you know, when they were pre-verbal, or when they were 3, or when they were 5, or, you know, when do I start? And I'm hearing you say start as early as you can in a way that you're comfortable, so you can start showing that you're comfortable and ready to have the conversations when they're ready to have them.
Yeah, exactly. But if you haven't, then start today, you know, and you can always find opportunities. There are so many, you know, things that are older, you know, kids are being exposed to, and so it's just if you kind of keep your ear perked for it, you'll see there are lots of opportunities for you to say, hey, what did you think about the lyrics in that song, or what did you think about what happened there, or whatever it is, and start a conversation. And a conversation about sex, if I know we have just a few minutes. Also, I think sometimes parents get stuck on, oh my God, it's going to be a conversation about sex. When you think about it, our sexuality, it's so complex. I mean, and it's related to so many other topics. I mean, it could be a conversation, and now we're talking about a little bit about older kids, but you could be talking about politics, about science, about just about anything, in the world, and there could be some connection to sex and sexuality. So I think that a conversation with your kids about sex doesn't have to mean you're telling them about putting a penis into a vagina or an anus or a condom or anything like that. It could be, a conversation about, something that's happening in the world, and I mean, or some, science, or just lots of different things. So I think coming at it from that standpoint, and knowing that it's really also a wonderful opportunity for a parent to impart their personal values. I think sometimes parents feel like, oh no, I mean, they just have a lot of fears around it. But I think if rather than seeing it as something you want to pull back from and be scared of, see it as something you want to move into, because it's actually a great opportunity for you as a parent to talk about your personal values, about, love and relationships and connectedness and trust and, and all these things. And that can start very early on too, So I think just seeing it in that positive light can really help parents feel comfortable.
I think those are some fantastic suggestions, and really, I think anyone, even if there's discomfort or baggage or any challenges, to know that you can find something that you're comfortable with that's out in the world, and not make it so much about what people often think about with having the talk, which, that very birds and bees plumbing, I'm going to talk about penises and vaginas, that there are other ways to have these conversations, and of course sexuality and sexual orientation is so talked about in our culture, as well as gender and gender identity, and it's universal, everyone has it, and so there are lots and lots of ways you can find those teachable moments. I know we're coming up to the end, but I wanted to ask, do you have a few extra minutes so we can get to our last two questions? And
yeah, I do.
Yeah, fantastic. And so I want to respect the audience time, but we've got so much good juicy stuff still to go. So stick with us if you can. And Remi, I have a question for you about just personally or professionally, and this for me is the heart of this show, because sexuality is such a taboo subject to talk about, and gender wasn't even talked about when I was getting my master's degree 10 years ago. We didn't talk about the T very much, and as you said, it wasn't even included for a long time. There's a lot of exclusion around that. So what's a time for you, personally or professionally, you really felt like you were censored by others or self-censored, and that you were able to move that to celebration?
I think, and I kind of started kind of leading up to this before, when I was talking about when I was working in the field of HIV, and I saw this need for doing some education around anal sex for other educators. So I created a workshop, and I did it at a couple different places in New York City for other educators, and then I also submitted it to a CDC conference in Atlanta. So it was an HIV STI trainer, educator conference, and it was accepted. And they contacted me and said, we'd really love to have you come, do this talk about educating about anal sex, but we can't use the phrase anal sex in the title. They said because we're part of the government, and they said all we need is for some politician, they really said this, some politician to just get a hold of our brochure or something and see that the government is teaching people how to have anal sex. And we can't have that, because they said you're absolutely welcome to come and do the talk. So I thought,
very clear censorship right there.
Yeah, very clear, very clear. Yeah. But to me, it really didn't. It made me think of, I think that there are things that are okay to compromise and some things that aren't. And this case, I felt like that was perfectly fine, to just change the title and the fact that I was going to be able to come and bring the workshop. So I called it, I think it was Educational Interventions on Non-Standard Sexual Behaviors. So
that's a fantastic workaround. And How did everyone respond to your
It was
presentation?
it was very well received. It was, although for me, it was one of my very first presentations, and it was to quite a large audience. I think it was the first time I ever did a PowerPoint. I mean, I had never heard of PowerPoint before. It was like we were still doing the little I don't remember, the little slides you had to put on the machine. Anyway,
Yeah.
so I think I was nervous, but I do remember that. I probably said a lot of ums and ums, but it actually went really well. It was very well attended. So I think that it was worth it. You know, I don't think there was any need for me to argue and say it has to say anal sex in the title.
Right.
You know, I think I got the point across, and so.
Well, and what's really cool about it is that it seems like you were able to reach an audience that you may not have been able to reach otherwise, and that they were still willing for you to talk about the topic and were willing to celebrate that, even though they were aware of that it wouldn't necessarily be safe for them, especially politically or around funding, maybe.
I totally respect that. I totally respect the position that they were in. I mean, I did it at the Harm Reduction Training Institute in New York City, and they had no problem with it, you know, but they're a nonprofit, and So that was probably the first thing that came to mind about the Censored to Celebrated.
That's such a great story, and anal sex is still one of those things that lots of people don't want to talk about. So yes. I really appreciate that story, and I'm aware of the censorship that still happens in lots of different communities and conversations around that. So thank you for bringing that. Last thing, tell me who inspires you in your work, and is there anything you want to share with us as we wrap up? And I do have a quote here. I'm going to see if I can pull it up on the screen as you start talking. So let's see if I can do this. Oh, hang on. I'm gonna let you talk first because I'm looking for it.
I'll try to stare at this little red dot and talk.
Okay, and I will look for the quote.
Okay, no worries. You know, I was thinking about this. Honestly, I think that the people that I work with, like for instance, we didn't really get a chance to talk about Gender Spectrum, but Gender Spectrum is an incredible organization that works with gender creative children, youth, and their families. And I think that, you know, being at that conference and seeing the kids there, the transgender youth and their families, and the bravery, and what they're going through and what they're fighting against and what they're fighting for, and to me that's incredibly inspiring. And when I have the opportunity, also, to work with people, I teach a class on female sexuality, and when I see, I have all these great stories, but I can't share because of patient confidentiality. But just to share that, when I see, you don't get to see in a 2-hour class a complete transformation. But when I see somebody who sort of comes in expressing a lot of hopelessness, and then after a couple hours of conversation and hearing from other women that they're not alone, and kind of brainstorming and coming up with some ideas, and that they leave with a little bit of hope, to me, I find that most inspiring. So I guess I'd say, where I find most of my inspiration is from the people that I work with and that I get to share some of this with. For me, that's been, are we still there? Oh, okay, there's the quote.
Yeah, no, I think that for me that's
probably been my inspiration the most.
Well, and that makes a lot of sense to me, because the quote that you sent me as one of your inspirations is this one from Audre Lorde, who's so inspiring for many of us, especially in this field and poetry. And the quote is, "It is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences." And very much what you're speaking to, I think, is and let me get back here, stop sharing. What we get back to in what you were saying and being inspired by the people you work with is that that's a place that you're seeing that acceptance and that recognition starting to happen, so that we can move towards the celebration, away from the censorship, through education and towards the celebration. And I think it's so powerful that you get to do that as part of your work. And I'm very excited that we got the chance to talk about it.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you, Remi. It's I wish we could talk for a lot longer, and I know the conversation will keep going. We will be online here to answer folks' questions after the fact here on the event page. So please feel free to share those with us. I also want to let you know that The next Censored to Celebrated is happening on Saturday, December 20th at 1 p.m. Central Time. And I know it's holiday time, so it's super busy, but we're doing a really fun one where we're talking about art and how art can help us explore sexuality and gender and the alphabet soup of sexuality and gender. So if you would like to be on the list and find out more details about that, please go ahead. I'll put the link that you can sign up to get on the email list. You can always ping me and ask to be in the Censored to Celebration notification circle if you'd rather receive the notifications on Gmail. So thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Thank you, Remi. Please remind us of how we can find you online if people have questions. Or
healthysexforlife.com.
Fantastic.
And feel free to send me emails at healthysexforlife@gmail.
Fantastic, great. And I did put that link in the events too, so that's fantastic. And until I see everyone again in December, I hope that you get a chance to celebrate all the people in your life. I know this is a time here in the United States that we're thinking a lot about gratitude, we're thinking a lot about celebration, and I just want everyone to remember, especially with this Transgender Day of Remembrance that just happened on November 20th, that a lot of people still have many, many challenges around diverse sexuality and gender, whether they identify with that or not. If there's a perception that they are of diverse sexuality or gender, there's often a lot of fear and hatred and even death. So that's a big thing I've been thinking about. I wrote a post about it today, and I think it's why, for me, Remi, it's so important that we talk with our kids and get comfortable with this stuff ourselves so that we can create an environment that isn't censoring and isn't hurting other people, but is really starting to celebrate and bring an awareness of folks in the world who need that support because of their differences. And, you know, ultimately, we all need to be celebrated. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Remi. I'll see you in December. Okay. And I'm going to stop the broadcast. Thanks again, everybody. Bye.